There is a quiet shift that happens the moment you stop trying to understand people only through the lens of who you believe they should be, and begin instead to see them as expressions of life unfolding in its own mysterious, improvised rhythm. When this shift takes place, everything softens: the judgments, the resistance, the constant need to categorize what is good, what is bad, what is acceptable or wrong, and in that softening, a deeper clarity begins to emerge. You start noticing that every person you meet carries an entire universe within them, a universe you cannot fully see, but one you can sense if you listen not just with your ears, but with your presence. Because people are not fixed points, they are movements, changing, adapting, trying, failing, rising, collapsing, learning, forgetting, and learning again. So the simple shift is this: instead of meeting people as characters in your story, meet them as momentary reflections of the same life that breathes through you. This life has no agenda, no rigid rulebook. It simply expresses itself through countless forms, and each form, each person, is doing the best they can with the consciousness available to them at that moment. When you begin to see others from this understanding, irritation loses its sharpness, disappointment softens into compassion, and even conflict becomes less like a battlefield and more like two waves colliding before, returning to the same ocean. You realize that no one is truly against you. They are simply acting from the stories, wounds, hopes, and fears that shape their current reality. And when you see this, you stop taking everything so personally. A harsh word becomes a signal of someone else's pain. A cold tone becomes a sign of their own inner distance from themselves. An unexpected kindness becomes a reminder that beauty can appear without reason. This shift does not mean you must tolerate every behavior, nor does it mean you abandon boundaries. It simply means your heart remains open, even when your decisions must be firm. You can step away without closing off. You can say no without hatred. You can walk your own path without seeing others as obstacles. When you adopt this perspective, relationships transform. People begin to feel safe around you because they sense that you are not trying to bend them into a shape that fits your expectations. They feel allowed to be human, allowed to make mistakes, allowed to change, allowed to express their confusion, their contradictions, their vulnerabilities. And as you offer this spaciousness to others, you begin offering it to yourself. You realize that the same compassion you extend outward must return inward. You too are learning, unfolding, becoming. You too are shaped by forgotten moments, ancient fears, small victories, uncertain hopes. When you see this, you no longer demand perfection from yourself. You begin to treat your own heart with the same gentleness you offer the world. This shift is not an intellectual idea, it is a lived experience. It happens in the stillness between reactions, in the breath you take before responding, in the subtle pause where awareness replaces impulse. In that pause, you remember that every person, including you, is part of a vast dance, a dance without a single dancer in charge. And as this awareness grows, you start to feel a quiet freedom. A freedom from the old need to control, fix, or judge. A freedom to meet life as it is, not as you think it should be. This is where everything begins to change. Not because people change, but because the way you see them does. And through that vision, a new kind of connection becomes possible. A connection that doesn't rely on agreement, or on shared beliefs, or on matching personalities, but on something far simpler and far more profound. A recognition that beneath all appearances there is a common thread weaving us together, a shared essence moving through countless forms. When you begin to see this, you no longer encounter strangers. You encounter reflections, not identical to you, but arising from the same source, shaped by the same forces of birth, time, experience, and uncertainty. You recognize that the person in front of you is not an isolated being, but a continuation of the same life that pulses through the trees, the oceans, the laughter of children, the silence of mountains, and the quiet beating of your own heart. And this realization brings a remarkable ease into your interactions. You find yourself becoming less reactive, less defensive, less hurried to protect an identity that was always more fragile in your mind than in the world. You begin to relax into the presence of others. Your listening deepens, not because you try harder, but because you no longer need to guard yourself against what you hear. You start to notice that every person you meet is carrying a story they rarely speak aloud, a longing they don't know how to express, a weight they've been holding for years, a joy they're afraid won't last. And suddenly, you realize that behind every expression, whether soft or sharp, warm or cold, there is something profoundly human, reaching to be understood. This understanding shifts the way you respond. You stop trying to fix people. You stop trying to correct their path. You stop trying to secure some emotional advantage. Instead, you become a mirror in which they feel seen, not judged, not compared, just seen. And in that feeling, something inside them loosens, walls soften, tension dissolves. Even in silence, there is a sense of being met. Not by someone who wants to change them, but by someone who recognizes the life within them. It is in these moments that you realize how rare and precious genuine presence is. Most people are not truly listened to. Most people do not feel understood. Most people do not feel safe to reveal themselves. But when you make this shift, you become one of the few places in the world where another human being can rest, even for a moment. And this rest matters. Because in that space of acceptance, a person begins to discover themselves. They begin to see who they are beneath the layers of fear and expectation. Sometimes they even realize possibilities they had forgotten. Sometimes they remember dreams they abandoned long ago. Sometimes they simply breathe for the first time in years. And as they breathe, you breathe with them. As they soften, you soften too, because compassion is not a one-way flow. It is a shared field, a resonance, a quiet recognition that the boundaries separating us are thinner than we ever imagined. This shift does not require extraordinary effort. It requires only awareness, a slight turning of attention, a willingness to pause before assuming, a willingness to see instead of react, a willingness to open instead of tighten. And once you experience this way of seeing, you cannot unsee it. You begin to notice it everywhere. In the eyes of strangers, in the tone of someone's voice, in the unspoken language of gestures and glances. You realize that the world is constantly communicating, not just through words, but through the subtle energy of being. And when you meet the world like this, something within you begins to transform, not in a dramatic flash, but in a quiet, steady unfolding. You start to feel less like an isolated observer of life and more like a participant in a movement that carries everyone, even those who seem lost, confused, or disconnected. And you begin to understand that no one is truly separate from this unfolding, not even the people who appear closed or hardened. With this awareness, the sharp edges of the world seem to soften. Conversations feel less like battles. Disagreements feel less like threats. And even moments of tension become invitations to deepen your presence rather than recoil into fear. You find yourself responding with curiosity instead of judgment, with patience instead of urgency, with openness instead of resistance. And as this continues, you notice that the need to be understood becomes less important than the willingness to understand. Because you discover a quiet truth that when you truly see another person, you no longer crave validation from them. The act of seeing becomes its own fulfillment, its own clarity, its own peace. People sense this shift in you. They feel it not through your words, but through your energy. There is a calm in your presence, a spaciousness that does not demand, does not cling, does not shrink, a spaciousness that invites honesty without pressure, depth without force, connection without fear. In this space, even the most guarded hearts begin to loosen, not because you persuade them, but because your presence gives them permission to be real, to drop the mask, to let go of their rehearsed version of themselves, and exist for a moment without performing, You start to see that every mask a person wears is an act of protection, a shield crafted over years of misunderstanding, disappointment, and survival. And when you recognize this, you no longer resent the armor people carry. You understand that beneath it, there is always a softness, always a wound, always a hope waiting for a safe place to emerge. This understanding changes the way you walk through the world. You move with a little more gentleness, a little more patience, a little more willingness to let others unfold at their own pace, just as life has allowed you to unfold at yours. And gradually, the boundaries between self and other blur, not in a way that erases individuality, but in a way that reveals our shared essence. You begin to feel that every encounter, whether fleeting or profound, is a meeting with another expression of the same consciousness, discovering itself. And with this realization, even brief interactions take on a subtle significance. A glance from a passerby, a short exchange with a stranger, a moment of misunderstanding, a moment of unexpected kindness. All of it becomes part of a deeper tapestry. A tapestry woven from countless threads of human experience, each one touching the next. You find that nothing is as random as it once seemed. Every person you meet, every conversation you share, becomes an opportunity to witness life exploring itself through different shapes and perspectives. And when you see this, you can't help but soften into a quieter, more grounded way of being. And in this grounding, you begin to sense the subtle harmony that has always been present. A harmony beneath the noise, beneath the conflict, beneath the illusions of separation. A harmony that waits patiently for you to notice. And as you begin to feel this harmony, something inside you recognizes it, not as a new discovery, but as a remembrance, a remembering of a truth you've carried since before you had words, a truth that whispers, we are not separate, we are expressions of one life, meeting itself again and again in different forms. When this remembrance settles into your being, you begin to move differently. You speak with more intention. You listen with more depth. You see with more clarity, not because you force yourself to, but because it becomes the most natural way to be, a way that aligns with the quiet intelligence of life itself. And from this place, even the smallest gestures take on significance. A smile becomes a bridge. A pause becomes a doorway. A moment of genuine attention becomes a gift that echoes far beyond the moment. You begin to understand that the greatest influence you will ever have on another person has nothing to do with convincing them, nothing to do with correcting them, nothing to do with proving anything at all. It has everything to do with how deeply you can be present, how openly you can see them, how courageously you can allow your heart to remain available, even in the face of uncertainty. People feel this. They feel when they are truly seen. They feel when they are met without judgment. They feel when they are welcomed instead of analyzed. And in that feeling, something awakens within them, something brave, something tender, something profoundly human. And so the shift continues from inside you to the people you meet, from them to the people they touch, a quiet ripple moving through conversations, families, rooms, and moments, a ripple that transforms not with noise, but with presence, not with pressure, but with understanding. And as you live this way, you begin to realize something extraordinary, that every person you encounter is not only a reflection of life.
You know, there's something rather strange that's been happening to you lately. The things that used to light you up don't anymore. That song you played on repeat until your ears bled, now it's just noise. The food you craved tastes like cardboard in your mouth. Even the people you love, the ones whose laughter used to fill your chest with warmth, they feel distant, muted, like you're watching them through glass. And here's what terrifies you most. You're starting to wonder if you've lost the ability to feel anything at all. If something inside you has died and you didn't even notice it dying, but I want to suggest something quite different to you today. What if this numbness isn't death at all? What if it's the most dangerous phase of waking up you'll ever experience? Let me describe it more precisely, because I suspect you know exactly what I'm talking about. You wake up in the morning and there's nothing. No dread. Exactly. No excitement either. Just a kind of gray neutrality that follows you like a shadow. You scroll through your phone looking for something, anything that might spark that old feeling. A video, a message, a piece of news that matters. Nothing lands. You try your old escapes. Maybe you binge a series you used to love. Maybe you buy something you don't need. Maybe you reach for a drink, a substance, a person. And here's the truly terrifying part. Even when you get what you wanted, even when the thing arrives or the experience happens, there's no payload, no rush, no satisfaction. It's like biting into fruit and tasting only texture. The sweetness is gone, and you start to panic, don't you? You start running through possibilities in your mind. Am I depressed? Is this a chemical imbalance? Did I burn myself out? Am I broken? You might even go to a doctor. Get tested. Try medications. Read articles about dopamine and serotonin, about hedonic adaptation and anhedonia, and maybe some of that helps, or maybe it doesn't. Because what if I told you that what you're experiencing isn't a malfunction at all? What if this loss, this death of the old joy, is actually a birth in disguise? To understand what I mean, we need to look at what we've been calling joy all these years. Because I don't think you've lost joy. I think you've lost something else entirely. Think back to the last time you felt genuinely happy. Really happy. What was happening? Chances are you weren't just experiencing something pleasant. You were experiencing relief. Relief from hunger when you ate that perfect meal. Relief from loneliness when someone finally texted you back. Relief from boredom when you found that perfect show. Relief from anxiety when the weekend finally arrived. You see, most of what we call pleasure is actually just the cessation of discomfort. It's like this. Imagine you're hitting yourself with a hammer, over and over, and then you stop. The moment you stop feels amazing, doesn't it? Your whole body floods with relief. But that's not happiness. That's just not being hit anymore. This is what the Buddha was pointing at when he said life is dukkha, unsatisfactoriness. Not that life is suffering exactly, but that it's fundamentally unstable, based on lack. We spend our entire lives in this bizarre cycle. Create a problem, solve the problem, feel good for a moment, create another problem. Make yourself hungry so eating feels good. Make yourself lonely so connection feels good. Make yourself bored so entertainment feels good. We've become like addicts who need the withdrawal just to feel the high of the fix. And for most of your life, this worked. This game of scratching itches you created yourself, it was enough. It felt like living. But then something shifted. Maybe it happened slowly. Maybe it happened all at once. But at some point, your consciousness saw through the trick. It's like when you learn how a magic trick works. Once you see the wires, the mirrors, the sleight of hand, you can't unsee them. The magic is broken forever. You can't go back to being fooled. And this is what's happened to you. You've become immune to your own manipulation. The itch you create no longer feels real enough to make the scratch satisfying. The hunger you manufacture doesn't make the food taste better. The loneliness you cultivate doesn't make connection feel profound. You've seen through it. And once you've seen through it, the whole game collapses. This is why nothing brings you joy anymore. Not because you're broken, but because you've outgrown a fundamentally childish way of experiencing life. And right now, you're in withdrawal. Not from drugs or alcohol, but from something far more addictive. You're in withdrawal from experience itself, from the constant stimulation, the peaks and valleys, the drama of your own creation. You're a thrill addict who's been cut off from the supply. And like any addict in withdrawal, you feel like you're dying. You feel hollow, empty, like a ghost walking through a world that's lost its color. You look at people around you who still seem to be enjoying things, and you feel envious, confused. Why can they still feel and I can't? but they're not more alive than you. They're just still asleep, still willing to believe in the game, still able to get high on their own manufactured crises and resolutions. You can't anymore. I knew a woman once, let's call her Maya, who went through this exact thing. She was a musician. Her whole identity was built around the rush of performing, the high of applause, the intoxication of creating something beautiful. And then one day, she sat down at her piano and nothing. No inspiration, no joy, no connection to the instrument that had been her voice for 20 years. She thought she was finished, thought her gift had been taken away. What she didn't realize was that her gift wasn't music. Her gift was the silence underneath the music, and she was finally becoming quiet enough to hear it. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because before you can hear the silence, you have to survive the absence of noise. And I know this feels like death. I know it feels like something precious has been taken from you. But stay with me here, because this is where it gets interesting. Imagine you've spent your entire life in a dimly lit room, a room lit only by candles. And you've been fascinated by the shadows these candles cast on the walls, the dancing shapes, the flickering movements. You've spent years watching these shadows, finding meaning in them, being entertained by them, occasionally frightened by them. They've been your whole world. And then one day, someone opens a window, and sunlight, real sunlight, floods into the room. What happens to the shadows? They vanish. Not because the light went out, but because the light became too bright. The candles are still burning, but you can't see their shadows anymore. They're overwhelmed by something infinitely more luminous. And here's the thing. For the first few moments after that window opens, you might actually think you've gone blind. Because your eyes, so accustomed to the dimness, to the subtle variations of shadow, can't yet process this much light. It's too much, too bright, too intense. So it looks like nothing, like emptiness, like a blank, washed out void. This is where you are right now. The window has opened. The light has come in, and your perception, still calibrated for shadows and candlelight, can't yet see what's here. So it feels like nothing, like absence, like loss. But it's not absence. It's presence so complete, so full, that your current way of seeing can't comprehend it yet. You're not depressed. You're not broken. You're being recalibrated. And the worst thing you can do right now, the absolute worst thing, is try to go back, try to close the window, try to relight the candles, try to manufacture shadows again. I've watched people do this. When the old pleasures stop working, they panic and they try to force it. They seek more extreme experiences, louder music, stronger substances, more dangerous thrills. They jump from relationship to relationship, hobby to hobby, belief system to belief system, desperately trying to feel something, anything. And all this does is delay the inevitable. Because you can't go back to sleep once you've woken up. You can pretend. You can exhaust yourself trying. But the innocence is gone. So what do you do instead? Here's what nobody tells you. You stop trying. You stop trying to feel joy. You stop trying to get back what you've lost. You stop trying to fix yourself. Because there's nothing to fix. You're like a caterpillar that's dissolved into liquid inside a cocoon, wondering why it can't walk anymore, why it can't eat leaves, why everything that used to define it is gone. You're not a caterpillar anymore, but you're not yet a butterfly. You're just soup, formless, undefined, in between. And this is unbearable for the mind, isn't it? Because the mind wants to know what it is, wants to have an identity, wants to be something. But you're not something right now. You're nothing becoming everything. You have to give up, you see. Not give up on life. Give up on trying. You have to stop trying to feel joy the way you stopped trying to catch smoke. Stop trying to get back to how things were. You understand? There is no back. There's only this formless moment, this soup you've become. And the more you thrash around trying to be something recognizable, the longer you stay liquid. And if you can just be with this, if you can stop fighting it, Stop trying to resurrect the corpse of your old way of being. Something new emerges. Not the old joy, something quieter, subtler, harder to describe. The old joy was like fireworks, loud, bright, impressive, but brief. This new thing, it's more like the sky itself. It's not an experience. It's the space in which experience happens. It's not a feeling. It's the awareness that feels. Do you see the difference? The old happiness required contrast, required things to be good or bad, pleasurable or painful, exciting or boring. It needed the hammer so it could feel the relief of stopping. But this doesn't need anything. It's already here, already complete. Whether you're eating a gourmet meal or stale bread, it's here. Whether you're in love or alone, it's here. Whether you're succeeding or failing, it's here. I once knew a man who spent his whole life chasing experiences. He traveled to every country, tried every drug, had every kind of relationship. And then, one day, he just stopped. He sat in his garden, doing nothing, for hours at a time. His friends thought he'd given up, thought he was depressed. But when I asked him about it, he said something I've never forgotten. He said, I finally realized I was traveling around the world looking for my house, and then I noticed I was already standing in it. This is what happens on the other side of the emptiness. You stop looking for life and realize you are life. You stop searching for joy and discover you are the space in which joy and sorrow both arise and dissolve. You don't need things to be a certain way anymore. Not because you've given up or become numb, but because you've found something that doesn't depend on circumstances. A kind of okayness. Not happiness, exactly. Not bliss. Just okayness. Everything is fundamentally okay, even when it's not okay. Does that make sense? Probably not. Not yet. Because this isn't something you can understand intellectually. It's something you become. And you can't force it. You can't achieve it through effort. In fact, the more you try to get there, the further away you get. It's like trying to fall asleep. The harder you try, the more awake you become. Just be here. In the grayness, in the flatness, in the void. Without trying to escape it, without trying to fix it, without trying to understand it. Just sit in it like you'd sit in a waiting room. Not enjoying it, not suffering through it. Just waiting. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to get somewhere else, the moment you stop resisting what is, you arrive not at some special state, not at some peak experience. You arrive at reality itself, unfiltered, unmediated, unadorned. And it's enough. It's more than enough. It's everything. See, you haven't lost joy. You've just become too big for the small pleasures that used to contain you. Like a child who grows too tall for their favorite hiding spot. The spot didn't disappear. You just don't fit in it anymore. And yes, that's sad in a way. There's a real grief in this. Grief for the simplicity of the old way, for the innocence that's been lost. But would you really want to go back? Would you really want to shrink yourself down just to fit into that small space again? Or would you rather grow into the vastness that's opening up before you? The choice is yours, of course. You can keep trying to light candles in the sunlight. You can keep manufacturing problems so you can feel the relief of solving them. You can keep chasing the ghost of a happiness that was never really happiness at all. Or you can sit here in this uncomfortable in-between and wait. Wait for your eyes to adjust to the light. Wait for a new way of seeing to emerge. Wait for the butterfly you are becoming to finish forming its wings. It won't look like you thought it would. It won't feel like you expected it to. But it will be real. More real than anything you've experienced before. And here's the final thing nobody tells you. The emptiness you're feeling right now, it's not empty. It never was. You've been calling it numbness, calling it depression, calling it death. But it's none of those things. It's just space. Space that was always there, hidden beneath the noise. Space that was always holding everything. The joy, the sorrow, the hunger, the satisfaction, you are that space. Not the things moving through it. Not the feelings coming and going. The space itself. And space doesn't need anything to be complete. It doesn't need to be filled. It doesn't need to be fixed. It just is. So when you ask, why doesn't anything bring me joy anymore? There's a peculiar phenomenon that occurs in human consciousness. And most people go through their entire lives without ever recognizing it. It's so fundamental, so pervasive, that it becomes invisible like the air we breathe or the water a fish swims in. And that phenomenon is this. Nearly everything you do, nearly every decision you make, nearly every word you speak is filtered through a question that runs constantly in the background of your mind. That question is, what will they think of me? Now, you may not consciously ask this question. In fact, you probably believe you're acting independently, making your own choices, living your own life. But observe yourself carefully. Watch yourself in conversation. Notice how you choose your words, how you modulate your voice, how you present your opinions. Notice how much energy you expend trying to create a particular impression, trying to manage how others perceive you. This need for approval begins early, of course. As children, we quickly learn that our survival depends on pleasing the adults around us. A baby cries and mother comes. This is the first lesson in cause and effect, in the power of gaining another's attention and approval. As we grow, the pattern becomes more sophisticated. We learn to smile at the right moments, to say the things that earn praise, to hide the parts of ourselves that meet with disapproval or punishment. And gradually, imperceptibly, we construct a false self, a performing self, a self that exists primarily in the eyes of others. The tragedy is that we forget this is what we're doing. We identify completely with this performing self and mistake it for who we really are. We become so skilled at the performance that we no longer know where the performance ends and our authentic being begins, if indeed there's anything left of that authentic being at all. Now, what I want to talk about today is what happens when you stop this exhausting performance. What happens when you cease to seek the approval of others. And I want to be very clear about what I mean by this, because it's easily misunderstood. I'm not talking about becoming rude or inconsiderate. I'm not suggesting you should deliberately offend people or disregard their feelings. I'm not advocating for selfish behavior or cruelty. What I'm talking about is something far more subtle and far more profound. I'm talking about the moment when you stop organizing your entire existence around the question of whether others approve of you. This is a revolutionary shift in consciousness. Because when you're constantly seeking approval, you're not really living your own life, you're living a kind of reflection of what you imagine others want you to be. And the exhausting thing is that these others are themselves seeking approval. So you're trying to please people who are trying to please people who are trying to please people. In an endless hall of mirrors where nobody is actually home. Let me describe what this approval seeking looks like in practice. You're at a gathering and someone asks your opinion about something, politics, religion, art, whatever it might be. Now, if you're honest with yourself, you'll notice that before you answer, there's a split-second calculation. You're quickly assessing the room, trying to determine what opinion will make you look good, what answer will earn respect or agreement or admiration. You're not asking yourself what you actually think. You're asking yourself what you should say to create the desired impression. Or consider your work, your career. How much of what you do is genuinely interesting to you, and how much is performed for the approval of employers, colleagues, society at large? How many people are in careers they don't enjoy, living lives that don't fit them, all because they're trying to meet someone else's expectations, parents, perhaps, or some abstract notion of success that they've absorbed from their culture. Or look at relationships. How often do people stay in friendships or romantic partnerships, not because these relationships nourish them, but because leaving would invite disapproval? How much suffering is endured? How much authenticity is sacrificed, all to avoid the judgment of others? The need for approval is a kind of prison. And like most prisons, it's largely invisible to those trapped inside it. You don't see the bars because you've been looking through them your whole life. They've become part of the landscape, part of the assumed structure of reality. But here's what's extraordinary. The moment you recognize this prism, the moment you truly see it for what it is, something begins to shift. And the moment you stop seeking approval, not as a rebellious act, not as a way of proving something, but simply because you see the futility and exhaustion of it, everything changes. Let me tell you what I mean by everything changes. First, you discover who you actually are. Not who you think you should be, not who others want you to be, but who you actually are beneath all the layers of performance and pretense. And this discovery is often surprising, because the authentic self is quite different from the performing self. The authentic self has different interests, different values, different desires than the self you've been presenting to the world. The authentic self might enjoy things you've been pretending not to enjoy. It might be drawn to paths you've been avoiding because they didn't seem respectable or impressive enough. It might have opinions that don't fit neatly into the categories that would win approval. When you stop seeking approval, you give yourself permission to discover these things. You can finally ask yourself, what do I actually enjoy? What actually interests me? What do I actually think about this? Not what should I enjoy, or what would make me look intelligent to think, but what's actually true for me. This is tremendously liberating, because you've been carrying around all these shoulds and oughts, all these ideas about who you're supposed to be, and suddenly you can put them down. You can stop performing. You can stop managing your image. You can simply be. Now, when this happens, something remarkable occurs in your relationships with others. The people who were drawn to your performing self, the people who approved of you as long as you played the role they wanted you to play, these people tend to fall away, and this can be painful. You may lose friendships, even family relationships. People may express disappointment, confusion, even anger. You've changed, they'll say, often with a tone of accusation. And it's true, you have changed. Or rather, you've stopped pretending. You stopped contorting yourself to fit their expectations. And they experience this as betrayal because, in a sense, you've broken an unspoken contract. The contract was, I'll approve of you as long as you continue to be the person I want you to be. But here's what's extraordinary. At the same time that some relationships fall away, others deepen. Because when you stop performing, when you stop seeking approval, you become authentic. And authenticity has a magnetic quality. People who are themselves seeking authenticity, who are tired of superficial relationships and social games, are drawn to it. You begin to attract people who appreciate you for who you actually are, not for the mask you wear. And these relationships are profoundly different from approval-based relationships. They're based on genuine recognition, on actually seeing and being seen. They're nourishing rather than exhausting, because you're not constantly working to maintain an image. You can relax. You can be yourself. Moreover, when you stop seeking approval, you stop being manipulable. Think about how much of advertising, politics, social pressure operates through the mechanism of approval and disapproval. Buy this product and you'll be admired. Adopt this opinion and you'll be respected. Behave this way and you'll fit in. The entire machinery of social control depends on people desperately seeking approval. When you're no longer seeking approval, this machinery loses its power over you. You can't be controlled through shame or the promise of status. You are free to make decisions based on what's actually true for you, what actually serves your well-being and the well-being of others, rather than what will earn you gold stars from some authority or peer group. This doesn't mean you become indifferent to others. In fact, paradoxically, when you stop seeking approval, you often become more genuinely considerate. Because consideration that comes from seeking approval is really just another form of manipulation. You're being nice because you want something in return, even if what you want is just a positive opinion. But consideration that comes from simply recognizing others as fellow beings, not as sources of approval or disapproval, is authentic kindness. Now, I want to talk about the fear that arises when you contemplate stopping the approval-seeking behavior. Because there is fear, tremendous fear. The mind presents you with catastrophic scenarios. If I stop trying to please people, I'll be alone. I'll be rejected. I'll be cast out. I'll lose everything. And there's a reason for this fear. It goes back to our evolutionary history, to a time when being cast out of the tribe meant death. To be alone was to be vulnerable to predators, to starvation, to the elements. So the fear of disapproval is ancient and deep. It feels like a matter of survival. But here's what you must understand. That ancient fear is no longer relevant in the way it once was. You're not going to die if some people disapprove of you. You're not going to be cast out into the wilderness to face predators. The worst that can happen is that some people won't like you. And when you really examine this, when you really look at the prospect of some people not liking you, you realize it's not actually catastrophic. In fact, it's inevitable. No matter what you do, no matter how much you perform, some people won't like you anyway. There's a wonderful freedom in accepting this. Some people won't like you, and that's perfectly fine. You don't need universal approval. You don't need everyone to think well of you. You just need to live authentically and find the people who resonate with that authenticity. Let me share something from my own experience. For many years, particularly in my younger days, I was enormously concerned with what people thought of me. As someone interested in philosophy and religion, as someone who eventually became a teacher of sorts, I was constantly aware of my reputation. I wanted to be respected, to be taken seriously, to be admired for my knowledge and insight. And this concern shaped everything I did. It shaped what I wrote, what I said in lectures, even how I dressed and spoke. I was performing the role of the wise teacher, the knowledgeable philosopher. And it was exhausting, though I didn't fully recognize how exhausting until something shifted. The shift came gradually. Through my study of Zen, through my own meditation practice, through simply growing older and wearier of the performance, I began to care less about approval. I began to say what I actually thought rather than what would sound impressive. I began to admit when I didn't know something rather than pretending to knowledge I didn't have. I began to laugh at myself, to show my flaws and uncertainties. And do you know what happened? Some people were indeed disappointed. Some people decided I wasn't as wise as they'd thought, wasn't worthy of respect after all. But others, and these were the people who mattered, appreciated the authenticity. They found it refreshing. They felt they could finally relate to me as a human being rather than as an image or an authority. More importantly, I felt free. I could breathe. I could explore ideas without worrying whether they were respectable. I could admit confusion, doubt, not knowing. I could simply be myself, with all my contradictions and imperfections. And this freedom was worth infinitely more than any approval I'd been seeking. Now, let me speak about what happens in that moment when you stop seeking approval. And I do mean a moment, though it's also a process. There's often a specific moment of recognition, a shift in consciousness, where you suddenly see the whole game clearly. You see how much energy you've been expending on managing others' opinions. You see how futile it is, how exhausting, how it keeps you from actually living. In that moment, something drops away. The burden drops away. And there's a tremendous lightness, a sense of relief. It's as if you've been carrying a heavy load up a mountain your whole life, and suddenly you realize you can put it down. Nobody actually requires you to carry it. You were carrying it only because you thought you had to. This doesn't mean the old patterns instantly disappear. The habit of seeking approval is deeply ingrained. You'll still catch yourself doing it. Still notice that split-second calculation before you speak. Still feel that pang of anxiety when someone disapproves. But now you see it happening. You're aware of it. And awareness itself begins to dissolve the pattern. You start to notice, there it is again. I was about to modify what I was going to say because I was worried about what they'd think. And in noticing it, you have a choice. You can continue with the modification, or you can take a breath and say what you actually mean. Each time you choose authenticity over approval seeking, the pattern weakens a little more. And as the pattern weakens, everything does shift. Your relationships shift, as I've described. Your work shifts. You may find yourself drawn to different kinds of work, or approaching your current work in a different way. Your daily experience shifts, because you're no longer expending so much energy on impression management. You have energy available for actually experiencing life, for being present, for engaging genuinely with whatever arises. Even your sense of self shifts. Because when you're constantly seeking approval, your sense of self is fundamentally unstable. It depends on others' opinions, which are changeable and often contradictory. One person approves, another disapproves, and you're torn between them, not knowing who you are. But when you stop seeking approval, you discover a more stable sense of self, not a fixed, permanent self, but a sense of being that doesn't depend on external validation. This is what the Eastern traditions have been pointing to all along. The Taoists speak of wu-wei, effortless action, acting from your true nature rather than from learned patterns and social conditioning. The Buddhists speak of dropping the ego, which is largely composed of these approval-seeking patterns and the images we present to others. The Hindus speak of discovering the Atman, the true self, beneath all the layers of social identity. When you stop seeking approval, you're not becoming a different person. You're stopping being all the false persons you've been pretending to be. You're allowing what you actually are to emerge and express itself naturally. Now, I want to address a question that often arises, but don't we need some social harmony? Don't we need to consider others? Won't everyone just become selfish and inconsiderate if they stop caring what others think? This question misunderstands what I'm saying. I'm not suggesting you become indifferent to others' well-being. I'm not advocating for selfish disregard of how your actions affect people. What I'm saying is that you can be genuinely considerate without seeking approval. In fact, approval-seeking often makes people less genuinely considerate, because they're focused on managing impressions rather than actually being present with others. Real consideration comes from empathy, from recognizing others as conscious beings like yourself, from naturally wanting to act in ways that don't cause unnecessary harm. This has nothing to do with seeking approval and everything to do with basic human decency and awareness. Moreover, much of what passes for social harmony is really just collective pretense. Everyone performing for everyone else. Nobody saying what they actually think or feel, all carefully maintaining acceptable facades. This isn't genuine harmony, it's a kind of mutual deception. Real harmony, real community can only be built on authenticity. It requires people who are willing to be real with each other, even when that's uncomfortable. So when you stop seeking approval, you're not destroying the possibility of genuine relationship and community. You're creating it. You're inviting others into authentic connection rather than the shadow play of social performance. Let me end with this. The moment you stop seeking approval is the moment you begin to live. Not the life you think you should live, not the life others want you to live, but your actual life, the one that's been waiting for you all along, beneath all the performance and pretense. And when you begin to live this life, you discover something wonderful. You discover that you're enough. Not perfect, you'll still have flaws, still make mistakes, still have struggles and uncertainties, but you're enough. You don't need anyone's approval to validate your existence. You're already valid. You were always valid. You just couldn't see it while you were so busy trying to earn what you already had. This is the great shift, from seeking to being, from performing to simply existing, from the exhausting effort of trying to become acceptable to the profound peace of recognizing that you already are. This is freedom. This is what it means to finally come home to yourself. Thank you.
Success is one of those words that seems to shimmer in the distance, like a mirage in the desert. From the earliest days of childhood, we are taught to chase it. Teachers speak of it when they grade your papers. Parents speak of it when they worry about your future. Society speaks of it in every story it tells about wealth, power, talent, or recognition. It is dangled before us like a prize to be won, and because it shines so brightly, we assume there must be some clear path that leads to it. Surely, if others have walked there, then we too can follow, provided we know the secret steps. And so we look for patterns. We gather the biographies of those we admire and study them carefully, as though they were maps to buried treasure. We count the hours they slept, the foods they ate, the routines they followed. We ask what they read, whom they knew, how they spoke, how they worked. Entire industries spring up to satisfy this curiosity. offering formulas, habits, techniques, the so-called laws of success. We devour them hungrily because we long for certainty, the assurance that if we follow the recipe exactly, we too will rise to the top. But when you pause to look more carefully, the picture begins to dissolve. For every story of someone who became successful by waking up before dawn and practicing endless discipline, there is another of someone who slept late, ignored all rules, and stumbled into fortune. For every tale of genius and brilliance, there is another of persistence without brilliance, stubbornness without elegance, sheer refusal to give up. Some are celebrated for their caution, others for their recklessness. One is praised for humility, another for arrogance. The more examples you collect, the less consistent the pattern becomes. This contradiction should give us pause. If success were truly the result of a formula, then those who mastered the formula would always succeed, and those who did not would always fail. But life does not seem to follow such neat arrangements. Instead, it produces a dazzling variety of outcomes, each unique, each irreducible to a single cause. The mind resists this because it craves simplicity. We want an equation: success equals intelligence plus effort plus opportunity. Yet the lived reality is far messier. Sometimes intelligence hinders as much as it helps, effort is misdirected, and opportunity is squandered. Sometimes foolishness, laziness, and accident create results no one could have planned. Perhaps the problem lies in how we imagine success itself. We treat it as though it were a static point on the horizon, a destination anyone can reach if they walk in the right direction. But what if success is not a fixed point at all? What if it is more like a meeting place, a crossing of circumstances and character, an alignment that cannot be predicted ahead of time? Consider the surfer waiting in the water. They may have practiced for years, built strong muscles, sharpened their instincts, but without the right wave, all their preparation goes unused. Another, less skilled, may find themselves carried along simply because the wave arrived at the right moment and they were ready to ride it. Who, then, is the successful one, the strongest paddler, or the one who caught the wave? The truth is that success is never just the person or the circumstances. It is always the marriage of the two. This is why success stories, when told honestly, often sound accidental. People admit that they did not know where events would lead. They describe strokes of luck, coincidences, meetings they could never have planned. Even when they emphasize their hard work, they usually confess that the decisive break came unexpectedly, a door opening at just the right time. And if you look closely at the lives of those who failed, you may find equally hardworking, equally intelligent, equally dedicated individuals who simply never met the right conditions. To call one a failure and the other a success may flatter our love of judgment, but it ignores the larger pattern at work. This is not to say that our efforts mean nothing. A surfer who has never practiced will not stay on the wave for long, no matter how perfectly it arrives. But practice alone is not enough. One needs readiness and opportunity together. And readiness is not only skill, but also the ability to see and respond when the wave does arrive. Many people miss their moments, not because they lack ability, but because they are too rigid, too fearful, too distracted to notice. Others seize them, not because they are more deserving, but because they are awake to the possibilities. So perhaps the common thread among successful people is not discipline or intelligence, or even luck in the ordinary sense. Perhaps it is something subtler, a way of being in relationship with life. Some call it intuition, others call it timing, others call it flow. It is the capacity to respond to what is happening rather than insisting that it match your preconceived plan. It is the willingness to ride the wave that is there, not the one you imagined. This is why one person succeeds by taking risks and another succeeds by avoiding them. Each acted in harmony with the particular situation they faced. To copy either one blindly would be foolish, because your situation will never be identical to theirs. What you need is not their specific action, but their attunement, their responsiveness to the moment. The irony is that this cannot be captured in a rule book. It cannot be reduced to always be bold or always be cautious. It is more like learning to dance. You do not memorize every step in advance. You listen, you feel the rhythm, you adjust as the music unfolds. And here we encounter the paradox that frustrates so many seekers. The only thing successful people truly have in common is that they are not following a formula at all. They are improvising, attuned to the moment, moving with life as it is, not as they wish it to be. This looks different in each case, and so it resists our desire for general rules. But if you sense the underlying pattern, you can recognize it everywhere. Think of the farmer tending his crops. He cannot command the rain to fall or the sun to shine, but he can learn when to plant, when to water, when to harvest. His success lies not in controlling nature, but in cooperating with it. The same is true of the musician, who does not force the instrument but lets it sing, who knows that silence is as essential as sound, or the painter who does not impose rigidly on the canvas, but allows the colors to speak, to surprise. Each of these is a metaphor for life itself. We are not its masters, but its participants, and our flourishing depends on how gracefully we join the dance. What makes this so difficult is our craving for control. We do not like to admit that so much depends on forces beyond us. It makes us feel small, vulnerable, at the mercy of chance. And yet, when we look back on our lives, how many of the decisive moments were truly ours to command? Did we choose the family we were born into, the time and place, the teachers, the friends, the accidents, the encounters? Did we design the economy, the culture, the weather? All of these shaped our paths, and none were within our grasp. To call ourselves entirely self-made is to deny the obvious. And yet, to call ourselves powerless is also untrue, because at each juncture we still had to respond, to say yes or no, to act or to refrain. So the picture is more subtle. Success is not a formula, but neither is it pure accident. It is a dance between what the world offers and how we move with it. Those we call successful are simply those whose dance happened to fit the music at that moment. Some may dance wildly, others gracefully, but what matters is not the style, it is the alignment. This realization can be liberating, because it frees us from the tyranny of imitation. If there is no universal formula, then there is no need to measure ourselves against the supposed rules of others. We need not rise at dawn if we are not morning people. We need not read 100 books a year if that is not our temperament. We need not copy the eccentricities of the genius or the routines of the millionaire. Instead, we can attend to our own moment, our own wave, our own dance. We can learn to be present, to listen, to trust the unfolding of life. And yet, this is also the hardest lesson to accept, because it denies us the security we crave. We want guarantees, and life offers none. We want permanence, and life is change. The mountain of success we dream of climbing keeps shifting its shape. And so, perhaps the first step toward genuine freedom is to let go of the need for certainty, and instead to find peace in the improvisation itself. If the first realization is that success does not follow a fixed formula, the second is that the only common thread lies deeper than traits or habits. For when you look closely at those we call successful, you see not sameness but difference. Each has moved in a way unique to themselves, and yet there is something subtle that connects them. It is not what they do, but how they are. It is not the content of their lives, but the quality of their relationship to life itself. You might notice this in the way they speak about their journeys. They often describe a kind of responsiveness, a willingness to take the step that appeared, even when it was unexpected. They do not seem as rigidly attached to a plan as those who remain stuck. They may have goals, yes, but they hold them lightly, ready to pivot when the world reveals a new opening. There is a quality of attention, of being present to the unfolding moment, that allows them to move with the current rather than against it. Consider how rivers flow. They wind, they twist, they change direction when they meet a rock, and yet they always find their way to the sea. If a river tried to move in a perfectly straight line, it would only collide with obstacles and stagnate. In the same way, those who are awake to life's movement do not cling to one rigid path. They bend, they adjust, and yet their movement is steady, always flowing toward a larger wholeness. Perhaps this is why, when we encounter them, we sense a vitality, an aliveness that seems more important than any specific achievement. We are often told that success requires control. Control over your time, your habits, your body, your thoughts. And there is truth in discipline, but control can become a prison. Too much control and you become brittle, unable to adapt. Too little and you collapse into chaos. The art lies in something subtler: cooperation. You do not command life, you converse with it. You do not dominate the dance, you listen to the rhythm. And this listening is the thread that unites those who flourish, whether they are artists, entrepreneurs, leaders, or healers. Think of music. A skilled musician does not simply force the notes. They listen, they allow the melody to move through them, they respond to what the music itself seems to want. If they try to control it too tightly, the music dies. If they abandon all structure, it dissolves into noise. The secret is that delicate balance between discipline and surrender. And in this way, success in life is not different from success in art. It is not the product of willpower alone, nor of passivity, but of a dialogue between self and world. This is why success stories so often sound like improvisations. One person stumbles into a chance meeting that changes everything. Another seizes an idea at the right time, not because they planned it decades in advance, but because they were paying attention when the moment appeared. Still another endures failure after failure, only to find that each so-called failure was teaching them the very thing they needed for the eventual breakthrough. To an outsider, it looks like luck. To the one living it, it feels like a kind of guidance, not from outside, but from life itself. It is here that philosophy meets practicality. For what we call Wu Wei, the art of effortless action, is not about doing nothing. It is about doing in harmony with the way of things. Water flows around rocks not because it is lazy, but because it is wise. It finds the path of least resistance, and in doing so, it wears down even the hardest stone. The same principle applies to human life. Those who align with the current of events, who act in accordance with what is already moving, accomplish more with less strain. Those who fight against it exhaust themselves and often achieve little. But how do you recognize the current? How do you know when to act and when to wait? Here lies the subtlety. It cannot be taught as a rigid method, but it can be sensed when the mind is quiet. Most of us are so filled with chatter, with the voice that insists we must plan and calculate and worry, that we miss the simple cues of life. But when you learn to listen, you begin to notice. The door opens, the conversation flows, the body feels light rather than heavy. Opportunities reveal themselves not as loud announcements, but as quiet invitations. To respond to them requires trust. Trust that life is not your enemy, that the unfolding of events has its own rhythm in which you belong. This trust is the one quality that seems to unite those who flourish. Not trust in a guarantee of success, not faith that everything will go your way, but trust in the process itself. They do not cling desperately to outcomes, because they know outcomes are never certain. They do not measure every step against a rigid ideal, because they know ideals are only stories. Instead, they enter fully into the play of life, knowing that even setbacks have their place. Even losses are part of the rhythm. Think of a child playing a game. The child does not demand that the game always go their way. They delight in the surprises, the risks, even the falls. They know that the play is the point, not the outcome. Somewhere along the way, adults forget this. We become serious, anxious, convinced that every step must be managed and controlled. But the childlike quality of play is what allows true responsiveness. And so those who succeed often seem to retain some trace of that playfulness, that openness to surprise. There is another way to see this. Imagine life as a great theater, with each of us an actor upon the stage. Some of us spend all our time worrying about the script, trying to memorize lines, fearing that we will forget. Others allow themselves to improvise, to trust that the play itself will carry them, that the other actors, the stage, the story, will all contribute. The play is never entirely in your hands, but you are never entirely powerless either. Your role is to play your part fully, to give yourself to the performance without clinging to how it must end. And what is success in this theater? It is not necessarily applause, nor fame, nor wealth. It is the quality of the performance itself, the aliveness with which it is given. Some roles are grand, others small, but all are part of the same play. And those who succeed are those who inhabit their role fully, who do not wish to be someone else, who give themselves to the moment with sincerity and joy. This is why, when you strip away the outer details, the only thing successful people have in common is this aliveness, this presence. They are not sleepwalking through their days, clinging to old patterns, resisting what island. They are awake, they are here. And because they are here, they can meet life as it comes, rather than as they wish it were. The irony is that when you understand this, the very chase for success begins to lose its grip. You see that success is not a destination to be reached, but a quality of being alive to each moment. You see that the applause of the crowd or the accumulation of wealth are only side effects, not the essence. And you may begin to realize that the success you sought was always available in the simple act of being present, of playing your part, of flowing with the current of life. There comes a moment, often quietly, when you realize you no longer know what you're doing. Not in the sense that you've forgotten your plans, but in the deeper sense when all the plans you've made stop making sense. You wake up one morning, and though nothing looks different, everything feels different. The job, the relationships, the daily routines, all the things that once gave you a sense of direction suddenly feel hollow, like a script you've memorized but no longer believe in. And the strangest thing about it is that it doesn't always come with sadness. Sometimes it's just a blankness, a strange, gentle emptiness, where the meaning used to be. You move through your day as though underwater, hearing people speak, watching yourself respond, but somewhere inside knowing that none of it feels alive anymore. This is the moment when most people panic, because for so long we've been taught that purpose is everything, that life must always be aimed towards something, a goal, a mission, a destination. We spend years building an identity around what we do, what we achieve, what we produce. So when the compass stops pointing anywhere, it feels like the end of something essential. But it isn't the end. It's the beginning. You see, this confusion, this uncertainty, is not a mistake in the system. It is the system. Life has a way of dissolving the structures we outgrow. It takes away the illusions we cling to until we finally notice that they were illusions. It removes the things we think we can't live without, and in doing so, reveals that we were never living through them to begin with. To not know what you're doing anymore is to stand at the threshold of a deeper truth, because only when the outer purpose collapses can the inner purpose emerge. Only when you stop knowing with your mind can you start listening with your being. Most people try to escape this stage. They distract themselves, fill the silence with noise, or rush to find a new project, a new meaning, a new dream to chase. But the more you run, the more lost you become. The feeling doesn't leave because it isn't meant to. It's not a symptom of something wrong. It's an invitation, a call from life itself to stop pretending you're in control. Think of the ocean. When the waves crash, the surface looks chaotic, unpredictable. But deep down, the water is still. When you lose your sense of direction, you are being pulled downward into that stillness. The storm of the mind begins to lose its power, and something quieter begins to appear beneath it. But because we've spent our lives identifying with the storm, we fear the calm. The mind says, if I stop chasing, I'll fall behind. If I stop knowing, I'll disappear. Yet the truth is that the one who feels lost was never the real you. The self that needs direction is only the surface self, the mask that performs for the world. The one beneath it doesn't need direction at all, because it never left home. This is why the ancient teachers spoke of the power of not knowing. Because to not know is to become teachable again. It is to return to innocence, not ignorance, but openness. The kind of awareness a child has when they look at the world without trying to control it. When you are no longer certain of what you're doing, life begins to show you what it's been doing all along. You begin to see that things move by themselves, that the heart beats, the lungs breathe, the planets spin, the seasons change, all without your interference. You begin to realize that the world is not asking you to manage it, it's asking you to participate in it, and there's a vast difference between the two. Participation means allowing yourself to be moved by life, not pushing it forward with effort and will. It's dancing with the rhythm rather than dictating the steps. And that's why losing your sense of direction can feel so disorienting, because you're shifting from being the choreographer to being the dancer. When you reach this stage, the mind tries to bargain. It says, if I can just understand what's happening, I'll feel safe again. But life doesn't owe you understanding. It offers you something far more profound experience. And understanding comes later, in the quiet moments when you realize that what felt like loss was actually transformation in disguise. Every meaningful change begins in confusion. Caterpillars do not know they are becoming butterflies. They simply dissolve. The same is true for you. The life you thought you were building is dissolving so that a more truthful one can emerge, not designed by your mind, but discovered by your being. So, when you find yourself in that fog, don't rush to clear it. Sit with it. Let it unfold at its own pace, because that fog is not a failure of clarity. It's the very process by which clarity arrives. You might look around and think everyone else knows what they're doing, but they don't. They're just better at pretending. Most people are following scripts written by fear, fear of being left behind, fear of insignificance, fear of stillness. You, however, have stepped off the stage. You've stopped acting long enough to hear the silence beneath the performance. And though it feels uncertain now, that silence is where the real music begins. Because the truth is, you don't need to know what you're doing to live a meaningful life. You only need to be here, aware, receptive, willing. The rest unfolds naturally. Think of how flowers bloom. They don't calculate the right moment. They open when the sun touches them. The same intelligence that moves the tides and births the stars is guiding your unfolding too. It doesn't need your constant interference. It needs your trust. This is the paradox of awakening, that we try so hard to find meaning, not realizing that meaning is what's trying to find us. It's been knocking on your door, waiting for you to stop rearranging the furniture long enough to hear it. You are not lost. You are simply being stripped of what can no longer come with you. And if you can stay open even when it hurts, even when it's unclear, you'll notice something miraculous happening. You'll stop trying to force the river and begin to flow with it. You'll realize that life was never something to solve, but something to experience. And then, without warning, you'll find yourself smiling again, not because you figured it out, but because you finally stopped trying to. You'll see that you were never meant to know every step of the path. You were only meant to walk it, one moment at a time, with wonder instead of control, with openness instead of certainty. And in that simple surrender, you'll rediscover something you forgot long ago, that not knowing is the most alive state there is. Because when you don't know what you're doing anymore, you are closer than ever to remembering who you really are. There comes a quiet moment after the confusion, when something in you stops struggling to make sense of it all. The mind, exhausted from trying to understand, begins to soften. And in that softening, you start to notice that life is still happening beautifully, rhythmically, indifferently. The trees still sway, the clouds still move. The wind still carries the scent of the earth. The same world that felt meaningless yesterday now begins to breathe with a strange kind of peace. Because the truth is, meaning never left you. You just buried it under the noise of needing to be someone. You thought purpose was something you could think your way into, when in fact it was something you could only return to. It was always there, beneath the tension, beneath the pretending, waiting for you to stop trying so hard to deserve it. There is an intelligence far older than your mind that has been guiding you since before you were born. It beats your heart, it grows your bones, it keeps you alive even when you forget to live. It doesn't need your permission or your plan. It only asks for your attention, not the kind that analyzes, but the kind that sees. You begin to realize that you were never supposed to figure life out, only to experience it fully. You were never supposed to have it all together. You were supposed to fall apart again and again until you saw that there was never anything to hold together in the first place. The falling was always part of the dance. When you stop trying to control the dance, life starts moving through you like music. You stop counting the steps. You start to feel the rhythm. And somewhere between the notes, between the breaths, you remember what you are. You are not the dancer. You are the dance itself. But this realization doesn't arrive with fireworks or revelation. It comes quietly, like the first light before dawn. You notice you're no longer rushing to escape yourself. You're no longer trying to trade this moment for another. You're simply here breathing, watching, existing. And that, you realize, has always been enough. You start to see that the moments you once called meaningless were never empty. They were simply unobserved. Life wasn't waiting to become significant. You were waiting to become present. And in that presence, even the smallest things begin to glow, the way sunlight dances on water, the way laughter spills out of nowhere, the way time slows down when you stop wishing it would move faster. These are not ordinary moments. They are the fabric of life itself, woven together by a quiet intelligence that asks for nothing in return. You once thought you needed a map to live. Now you realize you only needed to look around. You once believed you needed to understand your path. Now you see that the path itself was understanding you. Every detour, every delay, every collapse, it was all part of life's mysterious way of leading you home. You see, when you no longer know what you're doing, you finally allow life to do what it's been doing all along. You begin to trust the current instead of fighting it. You begin to rest, not in certainty, but in faith, not the kind of faith that believes in something, but the kind that simply allows everything. And it's here, in this quiet permission, that your life begins to breathe again. Because the truth is, clarity doesn't come from understanding everything. It comes from accepting that you never will. Peace doesn't come from solving your problems. It comes from seeing that you are not a problem to solve. When you stop forcing yourself into shapes that please the world, you realize the world was never asking you to change. It was only reflecting back your own misunderstanding of who you are. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are not late to anything. You are exactly where you were always meant to be in this moment. Aware, alive, unfolding. And perhaps that's what you were meant to learn all along, that life was never about becoming something, but about remembering that you already are everything you've been searching for. When this realization begins to settle in, you notice something beautiful. You no longer crave answers the way you used to. The questions remain, but they no longer torment you. They simply exist, like stars scattered across the night, silent, mysterious, and somehow perfect in their distance. You no longer need to define yourself, because you understand that whatever can be defined is not truly you. You no longer cling to roles or labels, because you sense how fluid you've always been. You no longer try to fix the uncertainty, because you see now that uncertainty is the space where life breathes. You stop needing to be certain to be free. You stop needing to be someone to be whole. And when this happens, a quiet joy begins to bloom, not the loud joy of achievement, but the soft joy of belonging to nothing in particular, yet everything at once. You realize you were never separate from the flow you were trying to control. You were the flow itself, dreaming it was lost. And so you sit there, not knowing what's next, and for the first time, that's perfectly fine, because you sense that whatever comes will come through you, not against you. You don't need to chase your next chapter. It's already writing itself, in the silence, in the waiting, in the very act of being alive. This is the grace of not knowing, that it leaves you open enough to finally see. You no longer have to pretend to be the one holding everything together. You can let go and trust that the hands of existence are far steadier than your own. And then, when you least expect it, life begins to move again, gently, effortlessly. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped blocking it. Not because you knew what to do, but because you allowed yourself to not know. You smile at the mystery of it all, the divine comedy of trying to plan infinity, and you understand that you were never lost. You were simply learning how to see again. So when you don't know what you're doing anymore, remember this: you don't need to. Life knows. It always has. And if you listen closely, you'll hear it whisper not in words, but in the rhythm of your own heart, that you are already home. After a while, you begin to notice that not knowing has its own kind of intelligence. It isn't confusion anymore. It's space, a vast, quiet openness that allows everything to be what it is. The mind, once frantic to decide and define, now learns to bow before something it cannot measure. At first, this feels disorienting, almost like losing the ground beneath your feet. You search for the next goal, the next explanation, the next identity that will anchor you again. But none of them fit. They feel too small, too artificial, too loud for the silence that's begun to bloom within you. So you stop chasing certainty, not out of defeat, but out of recognition. You realize that every certainty you've ever clung to has eventually dissolved, and yet something in you has remained untouched, unmoved, quietly aware. That awareness becomes your true home, your quiet refuge in the middle of life's noise. From that stillness, you begin to see the play more clearly. The constant striving, the endless self-improvement, the desperate need to prove your worth, all of it starts to look like a dream you finally awakened from. You smile, perhaps even laugh, at the absurdity of it. Because how could you ever improve upon something that was never broken? This realization does not make life dull. On the contrary, it makes everything radiant. When you stop trying to control the script, you begin to see the beauty of improvisation. You start to notice how every event, even the painful ones, carry a hidden rhythm, how each moment leads to the next, not through force, but through flow. You no longer see life as a staircase to climb, but as a river to enter. The river knows where it's going. You don't have to steer it. All you need to do is trust its current, and it will carry you exactly where you're meant to be. But trust is not passive. It is a living act. It means showing up without guarantees. It means stepping forward without knowing if the ground will appear beneath your feet. It means opening your heart, even when it has been broken before. It means daring to live without the armor of control, to love without the safety of certainty, to walk through the unknown as though it were your own home. In that trust, life begins to meet you halfway. Synchronicities appear not as miracles, but as natural expressions of harmony. You meet the right people at the right time. The opportunities you once chased begin to unfold on their own. You realize that the world was never withholding from you. It was waiting for you to stop resisting it. Something ancient in you awakens, a memory beyond words that existence has always been whole. You begin to see that the purpose of your confusion was never to be solved, but to humble you, to soften you, to open you wide enough to receive what intellect could never grasp. You start to live more gently. You listen more deeply. You speak less often, but with more truth. You become less interested in convincing and more interested in understanding. You see that every person you meet is also walking their own uncertain path, trying to find peace in the mystery. And that understanding breeds compassion. You stop demanding that people be perfect because you've stopped demanding that of yourself. You stop measuring worth by success because you've seen how empty success feels when it isn't aligned with being. You stop running from silence because you've discovered that silence isn't empty, it's alive, like the pause between waves. From here, a new kind of freedom begins to take shape, not the loud freedom of rebellion, but the quiet freedom of alignment. You no longer need to resist life because you finally realize that you are not separate from it. You no longer need to search for meaning because you've become meaning itself, unfolding, breathing, existing without needing a reason. You start to see that what you once called confusion was actually grace in disguise. It stripped away what was false so that the truth could be felt, not understood. It wasn't chaos. It was clarity taking a slower, more honest form. Now, every ordinary act becomes sacred. Washing a dish, watching the rain, sitting with someone in silence. You feel the same intelligence moving through all of it, not above or beyond life, but within it. You realize that enlightenment was never about escaping the world. It was about coming home to it, as it is. You may still wake up some mornings feeling uncertain, but that no longer frightens you. You've learned to recognize it as a sign that you're alive, because certainty is the end of curiosity, and curiosity is the pulse of existence itself. You begin to thank the very uncertainty you once cursed, because you see how it's guided every step of your journey, not through control, but through connection. It kept you awake, it kept you humble, it kept you human. And perhaps that's the most profound discovery of all, that being human was never a mistake to overcome, but the miracle you were meant to embody. When you stop knowing, you start living. When you stop trying to arrive, you begin to arrive everywhere. When you stop seeking the divine outside of life, you realize it's been hiding inside every moment you ignored. The truth you've been searching for isn't hidden in books or philosophies. It's in the way your breath moves when you finally stop rushing. It's in the warmth of a sunrise you almost missed. It's in the quiet ache that reminds you how deeply you can still feel. Not knowing what you're doing anymore was never the end. It was the invitation, the doorway, the call back to what's real. And maybe that's all awakening truly is, remembering what you already knew before the world taught you to forget. Because the moment you stop demanding that life makes sense, it suddenly does, not in logic, but in wonder. Not in certainty, but in peace. You smile, not because everything is perfect, but because it doesn't need to be. You're no longer waiting to begin. You already have.
It's a strange game we play. We spend our lives trying to repair ourselves, as if we were somehow damaged. Forever polishing the mask we show the world. And yet, if you look closely at the great figures of history, the ones who actually changed things, who actually lived, you'll notice something peculiar. they were all cracked, every single one of them, broken in some way. And it wasn't despite their brokenness that they became who they were. It was because of it. Now, this goes against everything we've been taught, doesn't it? We're told to hide our wounds, to cover our scars, to pretend that we have it all together. But what if I told you that your very brokenness, the thing you're most ashamed of, is precisely what the universe needs from you? What if the crack in your character is not a flaw, but a feature? Let me be very clear about something from the start. When I say damaged, I'm not talking about someone who is careless or irresponsible, or who uses their pain as an excuse. No. I'm talking about the person who has been to the edge, who has looked into the darkness of their own soul and come back trembling. I'm talking about the person who knows, really knows, that they are not self-sufficient, that they cannot do this thing called life on their own. These are the people the universe chooses, not because they are weak, but because they are awake. You see, the universe has no use for the self-made man. That fellow who struts around, believing he pulled himself up by his own bootstraps, who thinks his success is entirely his own doing. He's a closed system. There's no space for anything greater to work through him, because he's already filled to the brim with himself. But the damaged person, the broken one, they have cracks, and through those cracks, light gets in. Think about water for a moment. If you have a perfectly sealed container, water cannot enter. But if there's a crack, the tiniest opening, water finds its way in. It seeps through. It fills the space. This is how grace works. This is how the power of existence itself works. It cannot enter where there is no opening. And damage creates openings. Now, I want you to understand something very important here. Being damaged is not the same as being destroyed. A cup with a crack can still hold water. A window with a chip can still let in light. In fact, sometimes that chip creates the most beautiful patterns when the sun hits it just right. Your damage is like this. It doesn't disqualify you from being used by life. It qualifies you. Look at the great spiritual figures throughout history. Moses, they say, had a speech impediment. He could barely talk, and yet he was chosen to be the voice of God to his people. How absurd is that? The universe picks a man who cannot speak properly to deliver the most important message in history. Why? Because Moses knew he couldn't do it alone. He knew he needed help. He knew he was insufficient. And in that knowing, he became a perfect vessel. Or consider David, a small shepherd boy overlooked by his own family, considered too young, too weak, too insignificant. And yet it was precisely this David, this damaged goods in the eyes of society, who became the great king, because David never forgot where he came from. He never forgot his smallness. Even when he wore a crown, he remembered he was just a shepherd boy who the universe had picked up and used. The pattern is everywhere once you start looking for it. Paul, the great apostle, was a murderer. He hunted down and killed the very people whose cause he would later champion. Can you imagine the weight of that? The knowledge that you destroyed the lives of those you now claim to serve? And yet, it was this very guilt, this very awareness of his own capacity for evil, that made him such a powerful teacher. He knew he was saved not by his own goodness, but by something far beyond himself. Here's what happens when you're damaged. You lose the illusion of control. You realize you're not running the show. Most people walk through life believing they're in charge. That if they just work hard enough, plan well enough, be good enough, everything will turn out fine. But the damaged person knows better. They've seen how quickly everything can fall apart. They've felt the ground give way beneath their feet. And in that terrible moment of falling, they learn something the comfortable never learn. They learn to trust what catches them. This is why the universe chooses damaged people, Because they've learned to let go. They've learned to relax into life rather than trying to grip it with white knuckles. Have you ever tried to float in water? If you tense up, if you try to control every movement, you sink. But if you relax, if you trust the water, it holds you. Life is exactly like this. The damaged person has learned to float. Now let me tell you what damage really is. It's not the thing that happened to you. It's not the addiction, the abuse, the failure, the loss. Those are just events. Damage is what happens inside you when you finally admit that those events changed you, that you're not the same person you were before, that you cannot go back to who you were. This admission, this acknowledgement of change, this is what creates the crack through which light enters. Most people, when something terrible happens, they spend all their energy trying to go back to normal. They want to return to who they were before. But the damaged person realizes there is no going back. The old self is gone. And in the space where the old self used to be, something new can grow. Something that wasn't possible before. This is not recovery. This is transformation. And transformation is what the universe is after. You know what's fascinating? The people who have never been broken often have the hardest time with life. They're brittle. When something difficult comes along, they shatter because they've never learned to bend. But the person who has already been broken, who has already been bent out of shape, they have a kind of flexibility. They can move with life's changes rather than resisting them. They're like old wood that has weathered many storms. Strong not because it's rigid, but because it knows how to sway. I want to tell you about something that happens when you accept your damage. You become humble. You realize you're not the star of the show. You're not even the director. You're just one small part of an enormous production. And this realization, far from being depressing, is actually tremendously liberating. Because when you know you're not in charge, you can stop trying to control everything. You can stop exhausting yourself trying to manage every outcome. You can simply do your part and let the rest unfold as it will. This is what the ancient Chinese called Wu Wei, effortless action. Not doing nothing, but doing without straining, working without forcing. And you can only do this when you've been humbled by your own limitations. The proud man, the one who thinks he has it all together, he's always fighting. Fighting against circumstances, fighting against other people, fighting against life itself. He's in a constant state of resistance. But resistance is exhausting. The damaged person has learned that resistance is futile. Not in a defeatist way, but in a deeply accepting way. They've learned to work with life rather than against it. Here's something else that happens when you're damaged. You develop compassion. Real compassion. Not the fake kind where you look down on others and feel sorry for them, but the kind where you recognize yourself in everyone you meet. Because you know what it's like to struggle, to fail, to be at the end of your rope. You know what it's like to need help. And this knowing makes you gentle with others in a way that the undamaged can never be. The person who has never really suffered often judges those who are suffering. They think, why don't they just pull themselves together? Why don't they just try harder? But the damaged person knows it's not that simple. They know that sometimes trying harder is exactly the wrong thing to do. Sometimes you have to stop trying and simply surrender. And this knowledge, born of personal experience, makes them able to help others in ways the comfortable never could. Now, I need to say something about what damage is not. Damage is not an excuse. It's not a reason to give up, or to wallow in self-pity, or to treat others badly. If your damage has made you bitter, resentful, cruel, then you've missed the lesson. You've taken your pain and turned it inward or outward as poison, rather than allowing it to crack you open. The difference between the person the universe can use and the person it cannot is this. One person looks at their damage and says, "Why me? This is unfair. I am cursed." The other person looks at their damage and says, "What is this trying to teach me? How is this making me more human? What am I supposed to learn from this?" Both are damaged, but only one is becoming wise. There's a story I love about a man who goes to see a teacher. He says, "Master, I have so many problems. I am anxious. I am depressed. I have addictions. I have failed at everything I've tried. How can I possibly be of any use?" And the teacher says, "You have just listed your qualifications." The man is confused. And the teacher explains, "Your anxiety has taught you that life is uncertain. Your depression has taught you that happiness cannot be forced. Your addictions have taught you that you need help. Your failures have taught you humility. These are not disqualifications. These are your credentials. This is what I mean when I say the universe chooses damaged people. It's not that it looks for people who are broken and says, 'Oh, let me use them.' It's that brokenness creates the conditions necessary for something greater to work through you. It's like how a seed must break open before it can become a plant. The seed that stays intact, perfectly sealed, perfect in its seedness, will never grow. And what emerges from that crack is not the old you, perfectly restored. It's something entirely new. Something that was always waiting inside you, but could never come out, because the shell was too hard. Now with the shell cracked, it can finally emerge. Let me tell you what I've observed. The people who change the world are never the ones who had it easy. They're the ones who struggled, who failed, who fell down and got back up so many times they lost count. Why? Because struggle teaches you things that comfort never can. It teaches you that you're stronger than you thought. It teaches you that you can survive what you thought would destroy you. It teaches you that there's something in you, or working through you, that is greater than your circumstances. And here's the beautiful part. Once you've learned this, once you've really learned it in your bones, you become fearless. Not fearless in the sense that you're never afraid, but fearless in the sense that you know fear is just a feeling, and feelings past. You know that even if the worst happens, you'll be okay, because you've already survived the worst, or something close to it, and you're still here. This is the great secret of damaged people. Free to take risks, free to speak truth, free to love without holding back, because they know that holding back doesn't protect you anyway. I want you to think about this for a moment. Who would you rather learn from? Someone who has never failed, who has always succeeded at everything they tried, who has never known real suffering, or someone who has fallen flat on their face, who has known despair, who has clawed their way back from the edge. The first person can tell you about success, but the second person can tell you about life. The universe chooses damaged people because they have wisdom that the comfortable don't have. They've been refined by fire. They've had the unnecessary burned away. What remains is essential, true, real. And this is what the universe needs. Not people who are perfect, but people who are real. Now here's where it gets really interesting. When you accept your damage, when you stop trying to hide it or fix it or pretend it's not there, something magical happens. Other people see it, and they recognize themselves in you. Your damage becomes a bridge, a way for others to cross from their isolation into connection, because everyone is damaged in some way. Everyone has wounds they're trying to hide. But when you stop hiding yours, you give others permission to stop hiding theirs. This is how healing happens. Not through pretending to be whole, but through admitting you're broken. Not through presenting a perfect image, but through showing your scars. Your willingness to be vulnerable, to be seen in your damage. This is what allows others to be vulnerable too. And in that mutual vulnerability, something beautiful happens. Connection. Real, deep, human connection. The universe doesn't choose damaged people to do its work. Despite their damage, it chooses them because of it. Because damage creates humility. Humility creates openness. Openness creates space. And in that space, something greater can work. Call it God. Call it the universe. Call it the power of life itself. Whatever you call it, it needs space to work. And damage creates that space. So if you're sitting there thinking, I'm too broken to be of any use, I'm too damaged to matter, I've made too many mistakes, let me tell you something. You're exactly who the universe is looking for. Your brokenness is not a bug, it's a feature. Your damage is not a disqualification, it's your credential. Your wounds are not shameful secrets. They're badges of honor that say, I have lived, I have suffered, I have learned, and I am still here. The universe doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more real ones. It doesn't need more people who have it all together. It needs more people who are willing to fall apart and be put back together in a new way. It doesn't need more people pretending to be strong. It needs more people who know they're weak and let something stronger work through them. This is the great paradox. Power is made perfect in weakness. Not despite weakness, but in it, through it, by means of it. The very thing you think disqualifies you is what qualifies you. The very wound you're trying to hide is the door through which light can enter. The very damage you're ashamed of is the crack through which grace flows. So stop trying to fix yourself. Stop trying to present a perfect image. Stop pretending you have it all together. Instead, be honest about your damage, acknowledge your brokenness, admit your need for help. And then, in that moment of honest vulnerability, you'll discover something amazing. You're not alone. You've never been alone. And the very damage you thought made you unusable is what makes you perfect for what the universe needs you to do. And the best vessels are the ones that have been broken and put back together. They're the ones that know they're just containers, not the thing contained. They're the ones that let light pass through them because they're full of cracks. And that light, that power, that grace, it shines all the brighter because of those cracks. So be damaged, be broken,